Welcome back to another episode of Decoded, a Lost Codex podcast. I am your host, Jesse, the writer, director, and narrator for the Lost Codex episode. And we are back with two very special guests from last week's episode. Isei, welcome back, Isei.
All right, glad to be back. Part 2.
And Jack, welcome back, Jack.
Hello, thanks for having me back.
Absolutely, this is the last time you'll be on, never again. Just kidding, we have to talk about Forsaken again, so you'll have to come back. We are back with part 2.
We're gonna get rid of him like old Yeller style.
Oh wow!
Sorry, Jack.
We're gonna take him out back with a plague shotgun and morally gray him out of existence. We're calling up that tree right away.
Don't worry, I'll become redeemed.
We are part 2 on our little role-playing series. But before we dive into that, we're going to obviously talk about some news, and we're starting to see some additions to the live game that leading us to battle for Azeroth. And this week we had the artifact Powerup, which I don't think a lot of people saw coming. We knew from Data Mined Quest that there was a quest involving our artifacts and the Sword of Sargeras, but everyone just assumed that we would suck up Sargeras' power into our artifacts and we would retire it because it would be too unstable. And it turns out that's not the case. It turns out that the power within the Dark Titan sword actually automatically caps our artifact at 126. I believe it's 127 now. Maybe even further when this podcast comes out. And there's a really cool, crazy animation that your artifact goes through when you look at your artifact interface. It's absolutely freaking out. The number is in the billions. I'm pretty sure bigger than billions. And Sargeras is basically giving you the ultimate artifact power token, which we talked about this before we started recording. It's kind of, instead of just retiring our artifacts instantly, this is even worse because we're powering up our artifact to full power. And we're going to lose it very soon.
I know, we're becoming OP, and they're just kind of going to heighten us up. It's like, oh, look at all this power. Oh, you're so great. And it's gone. Come BFA.
You're going to replace it with a questing green.
Literally.
Here's a dagger.
Here's this piece of birchwood. Fucking love it.
The eye level is much better.
Birchwood. I'm just imagining like throwing the Ashbringer away and picking up a sword, a stick.
It's like, ooh, a stick.
This'll do. And obviously, as cool as artifacts were, we knew when Legion went live that we were getting rid of this one day. A lot of people ask because every expansion there's a feature that travels over. You know, the followers, the follower kind of storyline with Warlords came into play with Legion followers. And that's carrying over into Battle for Azeroth, but someone said, is the artifact carrying over? And I'm glad that it's not carrying over because there's a lot of restrictions with your weapon right now. And I like that sort of exploring and finding a new weapon, finding a...
It was a fun idea. I definitely enjoyed it. But I didn't really like that I was stuck with a weapon the entire expansion. Yeah, I could mog it, but I can only mog it from... to something that wasn't really fun or past expansions, which wasn't bad. But I just wanted to see what cool, outrageous models for weapons they could have in BFA. And yeah, you have, the upgrades and things like that. But keep in mind, I do play a Shadow Priest, and I only get, a dagger and a book that I never get to see anyway. And the dagger doesn't really change that much of appearance. It wasn't the most exciting weapon out there, so I just kind of felt it was a little lackluster. Not
exciting
bad,
in terms of appearance. It was probably the coolest weapon in terms of lore. But as you said,
lore was amazing. But in terms of appearance, it was very meh compared to other weapons.
Right.
I miss my wands.
Secrets, skins and things like that. So at least for my dagger, I loved her company, but I think it looked a little better.
What's interesting is that we're obviously the Magni says that. Or there's some part that says when you upgrade your weapon that your weapon's going to continue to get powerful because it's basically getting unstable at this point and your power's going up.
It's like playing hot potato with your weapon. You can only hold it on for so long before you can't.
And there's an interesting thought that someone said in my Discord the other day. And because we don't know exactly what happens on Teldrassil, and someone said, what if our artifacts explode and set Teldrassil on fire?
Oh, so it's no one's fault.
That would be interesting.
What if it wasn't Sylvanas? We know
Sylvanas did nothing wrong.
Well, that is, that's people say that so often. Without spoiling the pre-events, we know Sylvanas is targeting Teldrassil, and we know that she's marching towards Teldrassil. But it's suggested that burning down Teldrassil wasn't the plan. And so what if our artifacts explode? But someone also pointed out there's a little bit of complication there in that...
Why keep your artifacts in Teldrassil?
Well, the Horde is attacking, the Alliance goes to defend kind of thing. And that brings up the problem of who is the canonical wielder of your weapon. So...
Well, what we see in the cinematic, every major NPC does have their respective weapons with them.
Certain ones. So, like, Paladins are only represented by Liadrin, and she's the one holding the Ashbringer.
Yeah, of course.
Wrong skin color of the Ashbringer. They actually didn't put the right skin color in game. But there's that whole idea of why not Maxwell Tyrosus, who was around during Darian Mograin's days? Why Liadrin? Why is the Warlock artifact being shown for non-Warlocks only the Scepter of Sargeras? So they did give us some NPC class hall leaders, but that becomes problematic because are those class leaders involved in the pre-event? So there's that idea of, I don't think the artifacts have anything to do with the burning of Teldrassil because that puts canonical blame on certain leaders. So you could, if they say, the Ashbringer blew up, it was like, well, did the Ashbringer blow up because of the defenders or because of the attackers? Who had the Ashbringer kind of thing? And that becomes problematic.
This could be an interesting way to shift away from class halls, is to be like, hey, these class halls built all up these weapons, and then that caused Teldrassil to burn down. So should we trust them quite as much as we do? That could be a reason why their power wanes slightly, if it does.
That's interesting because the class halls, I want to know what the Argents are doing in Battle for Azeroth. I want to know.
Nobody cares about the Argents in Wrath.
Well, they had the presence in Legion, but it's kind of
I don't do neutral.
And that's it. That's what's interesting to me is what are the neutral guys doing? Why are Tauren druids?
We tried so hard, guys. We tried so hard.
Why are Tauren druids who are friends with the Cenarian Circle? Why are they okay with the burning of Teldrassil?
Oh, considering I have a druid, I am so invested into how the Cenarian Circle is going to deal with all this. And I'm here steepling my fingers a la Mr. Burns, like, oh yes, let's see how you guys try to figure this out. I
would love to see these factions these neutral factions pick sides. I would love to see which side, and it's obvious the Argents, the Paladins, the Silver Hand is obviously going to side with the Alliance, because the Blood Knights made sense, and the Sunwalkers.
Piss off so many Blood Elf Paladin role players who play with the Argent Dawn, because I know so many.
That's okay.
Maybe some Forsaken.
Some Forsaken as well. Sunwalkers were almost guests there, but the Paladin Order as your Order Hall class is the Silver Hand. You see the Silver Hand everywhere. A lot of Argent characters there, so there's no way that would side with Horde, but Shaman definitely seemed like a much more... The Earthen Ring would definitely seem to side more with Horde, because there's a lot more Horde characters in the Earthen Ring. So there's this... I don't...
Or maybe they just flip a coin. Okay, guys, let's see.
I don't think Blizzard will do it, because here's an example.
Oh, they would not.
Lady Liadrin is involved in the Arathi Warfront. So she is leading the Horde forces alongside Eitrig and some others, attacking Stromgarde. And Turalian's there. And Turalian even says, he laughs, even though he's literally outdated. He goes, "Ha! A Horde Paladin? What is this?" And she says, "You've been gone too long, human," or something like that. She makes a comment saying, your days of blue-only Paladins are gone. But it's interesting because...
What happens when you skip a couple of expansions, things change.
Literally, he quit back in Warcraft 2, and he comes back in Legion. And he's like,
whoa, what the heck is all this?
What's a blood elf? And I don't know. I don't think Blizzard's going to do it, but... Now, do I leave Isei choking in the final cut, or do I cut that out?
Should I start choking too? Will that, solidarity?
Okay, I'm going to just continue on.
It's gold.
Okay.
like and subscribe.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, people. Isei coughing.
I almost died. If you guys didn't catch that.
You were
Okay.
about to become morally gray.
I was about to become. Wouldn't that be like a bullshit way to die? Become forsaken. Everyone else has died in glorious battle. What happened? I choked.
That's it? You choked?
No one was around to give me the Heimlich.
It's like, when did you die? I died when Arthas came back to Capital City. Oh, you got eaten by ghouls? No, I was running and I had an apple in my mouth and I choked. Oh. That's so like...
Don't run and eat at the same time.
That's like, oh my god. Or like, what were you doing? I was a hairdresser and I ran with scissors and...
Oh, dude, I kind of want to do that now. That's really good.
I mean, you can use yourself as pincushion.
That's true. Forsaken.
Real good.
Okay, so moving on.
Sorry.
The pre-events
Nice
are coming out, as we know, with the artifact weapons and stuff like that. And on the beta, there's more news coming with every build. We're not going to talk about that, but we do know from an interview that specifically the pre-expansion patch will have the story events and actually world quests leading up to the burning of Teldrassil. We know that's a thing coming in a few weeks. Something else we learned is that there's going to be a gear catch-up as well. So the world quests are going to offer gear. So anyone who hasn't been playing recently or just starts is able to get caught up, which I thought was kind of cool.
If you have Turalian syndrome and have kind of missed out for a while, you can always come back. We'll catch you up.
And then man, Turalian comes back and he's got instant awesome Mog. What a jerk.
What a dick.
What a dick. This interview was with Forbes.
Oh, Forbes. That's Forbes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Blizzard did an interview with Forbes, and there's a lot. It's up on my MMO Champion. There's a bullet point list, but we find out that the plan is for the Battle of Lordaeron scenario to be available a week before launch. So they're only giving us a week to play this Battle for Lordaeron. I think it's going to be playable at live as well, but like the actual pre-event, the attack on Undercity is only the week up to. So we can imagine that end of July, mid-July is when this is coming out. So things are speeding up fast. Get your mage towers done. Get everything else done because that is speeding up. And this last little bit of news actually is going to tie into our very first part on the podcast talking about add-ons. And the developer for the add-on Total RP, Ellipse, on Twitter they're called Ellipse, CELWE. I will put their Twitter link in the description below. But they messaged me talking about some upcoming changes for add-ons in the future, and it's actually kind of interesting. Ooh. So, to summarize what TRP does, Total Roleplay and many other roleplay add-ons let you write background, physical histories, and descriptions for your character when you mouse over. It gives you a whole new page, and you can customize it yourself. And a lot of roleplayers use this. Unfortunately, trolls who, not trolls as in Darkspear, but trolls as in people who roll onto roleplay servers for the purpose of trolling, will download these add-ons as well and write profound, disgusting, inappropriate things, whether it's description, it's hatred, or just general jackassery. They'll fill their character description with all this bullshit, so when you mouse over it, you see vulgar things. And the thing is, unlike someone who comes up to you and says something inappropriate or foul, and you can report them because there's evidence there and Blizzard will take action. But with these add-ons, Blizzard doesn't have access to these add-ons. So you can report them, but there's no way Blizzard can verify that. In the Battle for Azeroth beta, there's a new add-on feature, I guess, called Send Add-on Message Logged. And I won't pretend like I know what that means, but I will read a short excerpt from the Blizzard Watch article. I'll link that below as well. Authors have the option to implement this new function. It will not replace the existing one. Basically, we can either use the existing add-on function and stay not logged, or implement this new one and everything will be logged. DBM uses this. Basically, what allows this new feature allows people to do is, if they report it, Blizzard, and this add-on enables it, Blizzard will have access to the add-on data as well. So in other words, players will finally be able to report players in-game for objectionable material found in add-ons, but only if the add-on author chooses to implement this function. Total RP will turn this on. Someone has a awful, disgusting, inappropriate Total RP backstory or sentence or anything, you can report it and Blizzard can actually get access to that and then ban the player accordingly, or or suspend them or whatever. And this is a huge feature for roleplay add-ons.
Yeah, that is huge because, that is a big problem. You do see people with ridiculous troll profiles, and it's funny for them, but, as with any troll, it's not funny for you. It's not funny for the other people who are trying to be serious, who are trying to have a good time. And I'm glad that Blizzard has finally taken a step to help us deal with these griefers.
Don't be afraid to use this. Please, it helps to clean up the communities in these role-playing servers as well. It can be used for good, and I do encourage people that if they are tired of being trolled, being griefed, or just a general inappropriateness going on in certain areas, and I'm certain we all know where, to just use this to our advantage for the sake of our role-playing communities.
Blizzard has been very good about cleaning up toxicity in their games, both in terms of hateful toxicity, but also this deliberate, disgusting...
But we can't expect them to kind of read our minds and kind of just hope they kind of get to it eventually. We need to be active in this as well and help Blizzard help us.
That's it. If we ignore, like we brought up last week, if we ignore Big Dick Bob Roberts, Large Richard Roberts there is...
Oh, Lord.
Fills out his add-on in a foul, disgusting way. You could ignore it, sure, but ignoring it doesn't really do much. Report it and get them, get that stuff off roleplay servers, because there's already enough challenges as it is. Let's help Blizzard help us. They provided us a means, now let's use it. And someone's going to say, "Man, you're just ruining fun, Lost Codex. You're just ruining." It's like, no, you're ruining fun.
It's the wrong kind of fun.
It's the wrong kind of fun.
That's not the kind of fun we want.
No.
Yeah.
Fun at other people's expense is never good fun.
No.
Ever.
It's bullying.
It is, and that is a problem on roleplay servers. So, with the mention of that, we're going to dive into the podcast, and there is a little bit of a disclaimer here. I'll let Jack explain the disclaimer, because he's the one who wrote that in the notes.
I did put it in the notes. Let me find it.
Very top.
All right. So today we are going to be discussing how to make a character for roleplay. And the disclaimer I'm to add is that these are the basics as the three of us understand them and employ them. That means that other people may have different approaches. They may have different methods or ideas about how to work within the lore, for example. However, a bunch of you were asking, hey, I want a more rigorous step-by-step guide for going into roleplay. And so that's what we're bringing to you today. Today is how to make a character in the view of Jesse, Isei, and, Dak the Undead Genie. Oh, have I ever established myself as the Undead Genie?
I don't think
That's something I only do in Discord.
But now you have. Now it's a thing now.
Now I have. Now it's a thing.
It's a thing.
Now they know.
Now they know.
I'm the Draenei Guru. Everyone's come to me for their Draenei thing.
The Draenei Guru, actually, the Undead Genie, and the Lost Codex.
I did say that last week. What Isei is to Draenei, Jack is to Forsaken. So I did say that. So we didn't say Genie, but now people know. Now there's an even more in-depth connection there.
I'll fulfill your wish. Just may not be what you want.
Calm down, Sylvanas. Okay, so with this, as I said, this will be a series. We will be coming back to different things, so definitely leave us your feedback and comments. This is how we understand them. Last week we went off on an introduction to roleplay, and I think there was a lot of people were expecting a how to roleplay. That's coming, especially next week. We're going to talk about how to start a scene and stuff like that. How do you start the walk-up? But last week was more of a gushing, personal experiences and why we love role-playing and how it's affected us in every way.
Yeah.
But
last week was the why.
Why this is the how to start with your individual character. So there won't be actually any, we'll talk about your character acting out in a scene, just preparing. Because there's a lot of, when you make a D&D character and you're given the chance by your GM or DM to make an in-depth backstory in your character sheet, you want to make sure you do it properly, and this is that process as we understand it. There's no right or wrong way. So there will be people who might disagree or think otherwise, but this is just how we employ this. And I thought it was kind of smart to start off with talking about add-ons very briefly. You say what's your comment on add-ons specifically for roleplay community? Because I know it's up to preference, but what are your comments on it?
It is very much up to preference, and I've used MRP for a very long time. I'm satisfied with it, and that's kind of like my go-to, and I haven't really changed it. I'm kind of a don't fix what ain't broken kind of girl, and so MRP has satisfied all my role-playing needs, and I kind of stick to that.
MRP is the OG roleplay add-on. It was there in the beginning. MRP stands for My Roleplay, by the way, for those of you who aren't familiar.
It's pretty solid. It's easy to install, easy to use. It's a great introductory add-on as well. I'm sure there are other ones. I think there's TRP as well, and I think there was a third that I can't recall off the top of my head.
Jack, didn't you download
XRP too? Mm-hmm.
I use XRP, which is mostly MRP with some of the quality of life features of TRP.
And some people asked, what's the best add-on to use? And there isn't a right answer. Just like
add-on is the one that works best for you.
Exactly. Yeah. And this actually
is asking what the best shampoo is.
Yeah.
Well, clearly there's only one option. But this is like asking what the best roleplay realm is. And this comes down to do your research, play around, see what you like kind of thing. MRP's been around the longest. TRP had a lot of cool features. XRP is kind of the new kid that has both. So for me, TRP is standing out because of this new feature. And actually, the author of the add-on said they are working with the authors of other RP add-ons as well. I don't want to say or confirm that everyone else is implementing this feature as well, but there's no reason not to. So I really hope MRP, XRP, and TRP come together to agree to make the roleplay community better. We all have our preferences. Just kind of play around. In the future, maybe when we're talking about actually roleplaying out a scene, we can show you what it looks like on screen. But each of us have our own preference, so it's do some read up, do some research, download each one, and don't have them all turn on at the same time. Turn them on individually and see what looks better, what's more comfortable. I believe TRP is the one that had a little feature on screen that you could, once upon a time, when you could click it, when you could toggle your helm on and off, you could actually toggle your helm on and off from a little button on TRP's main screen, which was really handy for role players. Now you have to mog it, which is a pain in the ass, but there's little functions like that.
Oh my god, I remember that.
Do you remember the good old days of toggling?
How old are we? Oh my god.
Blizzard said, you know what we don't want is for you to turn off your helm in the middle of combat. That's not... That isn't realistic as you pull 7 horses from your book.
And the cloak, too. The toggle for the cloak.
Yeah.
There was.
Oh,
now you just have to manually take it off, and it's not going to stop us, Blizzard.
Mog it. That's not as fun.
So Jack wrote here a very basic Q&A. What is the minimum I need to start role-playing? And with the add-ons, we covered add-ons. Only install all 3 if you want, but only run one at a time to see which one you like.
Yes.
Never run all 3 together. It'll probably set your UI on fire, so don't do that.
I should note that it is important to install at least one. MRP is the most lightweight if you only want one. But it does flag you as a role player. It does tell other role players that you are here, you're here to role play, and otherwise they see they look at you, they mouse over your character and they see nothing, so they assume that you're like a raider or a PvPer and they might not just talk to you at all. Now you can still engage with others in role play in that way, but you'll be kind of hobbled, or you'll have a disadvantage. Just in the same way as you can PvP, but if you don't have PvP gear, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So think of this as your role-playing.
It also gives you that extra burst of immersion. You walk up to a group and you see 2 dudes in armor and 1 person in a robe. Okay, warrior, paladin, and a mage. But when you mouse over them, you see, and you don't know this as your character, but you see Sergeant Richard whatever, and you see his apprentice standing there as a squire, and then you see they're talking to an archmage, and you can see his titles. You can see, he's a professor of the arcane arts in Dalaran, and these little quirks that, suddenly you're not just paladin warrior talking to a mage. It is a Stormwind sergeant and his apprentice, squire, whatever, talking to a Dalaranian archmage.
And it also does help a little bit in terms of a customization in a written form, or to prevent a little bit of a social faux pas when, say, a character is blind, missing a limb. we can't really see that on the avatar itself, but MRPs, TRPs give us a chance to kind of add a little note as you scroll over them saying, hey, my character's missing an arm, my character is blind. So you don't bring that up, and it's like you have to whisper to you on the side, like, psst, my character can't see, which is a little awkward.
Exactly.
Right.
And if your character recently just broke their leg, you can write in there's a little tab in a lot of the add-ons that says currently, and you can write hobbling because of a broken leg, and you have a cane. Now there's no maybe your character is a rogue, you can't equip canes or staffs, but story-wise, your character is walking around with a cane because he can't walk properly. And so to better communicate that, the RP add-on, a simple mouse over, will tell you, oh, this dude who's walking very slowly and really jaggedly isn't just hitting the button randomly, he's actually hobbling because whatever story reason. So what is the minimums I need to start role-playing? Simple description, basic history, basic motivation, and a decent transmog. That's a little bit of a funny note. At least Callie's level of decent transmog, because let's be honest, her transmog is low.
Basic.
What did you say in the podcast?
I called her a basic bitch.
You called her a basic bitch.
And transmog is something that players can kind of work towards. People aren't going to role play with you less because you don't have your transmog up to everyone else's standards. Some people are a little bit pickier about that than others, but
Some
personally,
people are
I've never found a lack of roleplay due to my transmog, and I transmog my characters in very basic, easy outfits. And again, I've never really had a lack of roleplay due to my transmog.
No,
so it's
we
mostly
joke.
up to personal preference, yeah.
Yeah, we joke, but like nobody's gonna say no because you're just wearing like a leveling robe.
Definitely 100%. It's not actually serious. We're going to bring this up after, but we might as well bring it up now.
But I know it can be important. I know there's a bit of anxiety, especially with people that have they want a certain look for their characters, but they don't have it yet.
I can't do
mythic
yet.
I've seen people be really worked up over like how their character should look, and what's available to them at the time. And I just want to reassure them, like, you don't have to. It's not that important.
That's true.
What's interesting, and Isei and I have actually talked about this, transmog, you can thank role players for transmog becoming a thing in game. Because once upon a time, before the Cataclysm Dragon Soul patch, if you had, when you role played, and people still have it nowadays, it was called your RP set. And maybe you were the main tank in your raiding guild, but when you weren't tanking, you were role playing. And you're raiding an Ice Crown Citadel, so you're wearing the Vrykul set or whatever as a warrior. But let's say that was just too elaborate. You just wanted a regular old Stormwind Guard set. Well, when you walked around Stormwind and you roleplayed, you were wearing low-level armor as your RP set. And then when you hopped into a queue, you jumped into your raid set.
And you would dedicate bags.
Oh my god.
Bag space. Everyone's laughing because everyone has been through it. When you dedicated bags to role-playing pieces that you had to have. Your role-playing armor set, you had your fishing set, you had your fancy set, and they were like just neatly organized in bags.
Totally.
And if you went to a raid or you went to a dungeon and your tank started to, tank, check their character because they're probably wearing an RP gear set, and it has happened to everyone.
Oh,
when they forgot, they logged off in their role-playing set. They forgot to put back their actual armor. They queued for a dungeon or raid, and they started to suck. And then why? Because you're wearing your role-playing gear, and you can't change in the middle of battle, so you just have to, pray you don't die. So you can just, whoops, sorry, guys. Switch it out.
This
but
actually,
as a practical matter... Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say that this actually happens to a lot of non-role players with fishing. People will be fishing and queue up, and suddenly... they're like, why is my damage gone? It's like, dude, you're tanking with a fishing
you're
pole.
swinging with a fishing stick.
Or even better yet, casters who don't notice it. They might not notice the fishing pole. So
I know. It happens to me because I play a caster. And so the fishing rod just sticks at your back and you kind of zone it out. As long as you see something sticking out of your back, you think, oh yeah, that's totally my stat, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, wow, why is my spell sucking? You take a really hard look, like maybe I missed something into your character sheet. And it's like, oh man, the fishing pole, of course.
This isn't enchanted.
But yeah, as I was saying, So what this
What's
means
the crime
is
you can't mog stabs with fishing poles? Because it would make for a really fun mage.
you can get away with just, you don't have to do a full transmog. You can just say, I'm going to remove my shoulders. I'm going to remove my belt, my braces, my gloves. I'm just going to wear a robe, or I'm just going to wear like a kind of a leveling gear plate set and say, hey, I'm a ranger, and people will accept that. Like, you don't have to have some kind of god tier transmog that makes you look like a glittering beacon of hope. Or you don't have to be Anduin Rin on the battlefield.
And that's actually
just look the part.
That's one of the underlying things about what we're going to be talking today is less is more. All these awesome transmog, all these awesome raid sets that come out, they make sense for certain races and certain classes, but they're really elaborate. And that's actually, I'm so excited for Battle for Azeroth, because for Kulturas, the leather mail and plate sets are just so down to earth and so real. The tones are very earthy and dark.
I mean, it's always fun to go for kind of like a Carnival Rio, because they were getting to that point. Some of them were getting really elaborate, and it's like, okay, I'm glad they're toning it down a little bit and getting a little more realistic, a little more gritty. Again, like you said, a little more down to earth, because you can actually mix and match it with a lot more sets, a lot easier.
Give me belts with pouches and
especially
and
if you're a priest. I play a priest. You don't want to stand out.
No, not at all.
That's why I really downplay my transmog a lot. I want to be just hiding behind somewhere. Don't notice me.
And that's
I usually do simple with a notable piece.
Yeah.
So you've got like something with a good color maybe, but then there's only one thing that's really got greebles and all kinds of crazy stuff going on.
And that's the thing is, rather than a huge WWE fighter's belt, give me a little belt with some pouches and a little buckle
dagger. I still have the bell.
Casters, shirts, and pants, please.
Yes, casters.
We've evolved from the robe.
Give us open robes. Give us a robe that the technology. This is getting technological now.
Give us coats.
Give us coats.
I'm happy with a coat. Let's get a long coat.
The Terrassians have coats. Yes. Give us their coats.
Give us those for Horde.
I don't want to see some people in open robes, honestly.
Good God.
The Stormwind Flasher.
Oh no. Jesus.
Big Dick Bob running through town.
Jesus. Large Richard Roberts is running through town with his coat on. And that's the thing is down to earth. You don't have your transmog could be whatever you want, and a lot of the sets coming in Battle for Azeroth for Horde side, I saw a lot of Horde comments saying these look ridiculous, and you're like, you're right, they do look ridiculous because they're Zandalari armor. The Zandalari use bright feathers and gold, and your little emo undead rogue doesn't wear feathers.
It's gonna look fabulous, darling.
And it's amazing. But I saw a lot of orcs and a lot of Tauren players and a lot of Blood Elf players getting all frustrated, like, these aren't good sets. And it's like, you do realize that you're going to Zandalar.
You're gonna wear those sets and you're gonna like it, okay?
And the best part is, if you don't, you can transmog out of them. That's the thing.
You don't have to wear.
There's some sets that Tauren are going, oh man, I don't look right in this frilly thing with wings all over it. I'm a big ass bull.
Aha! Is that a pun?
Maybe? Is it?
And what if Tauren say that?
We need a whole transmog episode, because
was it offensive to Tauren? Man, that's bullshit. What did you say?
We should have an episode where we do go through advice on how do you construct it good, what are good principles for transmog.
Because there are things
whatever you want
that Blizzard, when Blizzard puts them in game, for example. And I only say this because someone brought it up in my Discord earlier. Tier 19 Hunter sets. The Nighthold and Emerald Dream set is an amazing, beautiful piece of armor that is very Elven inspired. So when I see Blood Elf, Void Elves, even Night Elves in it, it works. It looks like, it screams Silver Moon, it screams High Elf from Warcraft 2. On my Orc, I have an Orc Hunter. It looks goofy as hell. It's very elaborate. It's very chic. It's very shiny, but it doesn't work on my Orc. But you can wear it on your Orc if you want. No one's gonna, maybe someone will say
your Orc just doesn't know how to work it. That's the thing.
He needs a Blood Elf to show him this is how you wear your armor. But we'll talk about Transmog another time, because I could talk literally for hours on Transmog. Isei, let's jump into let's jump into just the appearance of your character and starting off with your character appearance.
All right, so if you do have an MRP, TRP, any add-on, you're going to have to write a little bit of your character description, their appearance. And I cannot stress this enough that less is more, especially if you're starting out, because if you start writing paragraphs and paragraphs worth of your character's appearances and little details, as fun as it is for you to write, it's not as fun for other people to read. And they will clock out 3-4 sentences in.
Yeah, we don't need a paragraph on how black your hair is.
No.
Now you can write that for yourself.
And I'm saying right now, put down the thesaurus. Because
Yes.
we can tell if you've been abusing the thesaurus to write something very fanciful. And here's the thing. Either you're very good at writing and you can write a beautiful description. And we've all seen that one character. The description is flawless. It's short but sweet. It tells everything about them in the most minimal way. And we're like, man, I wish I could write like that. But you don't have to write like that. If you could just keep it, their basic appearance, their height, their weight, maybe something that not seen on the avatar, because admittedly, avatars are a little bit limited. Scars, missing an eye, they're blind, missing a limb, tattoos, length of hair, or any other distinctive quality that your current avatar cannot show, put it in.
And yeah, what Isei means here is like, you don't necessarily have to tell us how blonde your character is if you already have a blonde hairstyle. But if you have something, say, in your hair, like maybe it's in a bun and there's something stuck into that, or you're wearing a piece of jewelry that you can't represent.
And some of them you also can add links. You can add links, and also there's a place called tinyurl.com where you can take long links and really shorten them. It's very helpful. What you do with those, you link character art. And picture's worth 1,000 words. So write short, then add a few links. If you have character art, if not, it's a great chance to start getting character art. And there's many artists in the fandom. You can get you get a bust, a portrait, a full body, whatever. Add a few in there, and that gives us a better accuracy of what you want to go for in the looks of your character than trying to write every little detail down.
There's also a couple other ways to do it. Like if you aren't ready, you don't feel like your character is quite advanced enough to go have a custom piece of art done, you can say, okay, it's inspired by this other piece of artwork that's maybe more generic, like here's a night elf, but she has some unique qualities. Or you can use real world celebrities and go, hey, this is a base claim, quote unquote. Like I look kind of like Kate Blanchett as my female
And people
human.
do change over time. Like if we look at how photographs from 10, 12 years ago, how we looked back then, we probably don't look the same.
Good God.
So if you want to have a bit of just starter art, because your character needs an appearance of some sort, you want to just get a little bit of art here and there. References are very good. Face claims also very good. And as you're kind of going along, they start to evolve. Then you can just kind of upgrade it whenever you want to. You can always go back and change it. That's the beauty of it.
Your character.
But I will say,
go ahead.
Oh, go on, Jesse.
I was going to say your character is totally up to your description. Anything you want is up to you. And something I found that's actually really helpful, if you're stuck trying to write your character description, start with bullet points. And honestly, bullet form is so easy to read.
It helps so much.
You skim so much. Okay, here's a bullet form of my character description. Missing a right eye, broken nose. You're kind of like, okay, done. There's not lines and lines. It's all right. I got a visual on how Richard Roberts here looks. This is good. And then later on, maybe you do want to write a fancy description, but a lot of people think bullet form is not professional. You're not trying to impress anyone with your MRP or TRP.
Less is more.
Less is so much more.
Think of it as a summary and an introduction to your character. The goal here isn't to write fan fiction about your character. It's to get people to want to engage in a role-playing scene with you. This is them not even trying the pie yet. They just smell the pie in the distance.
And I also use it personally. I use
piece.
it when I look at a description. If they do have a physical characteristic, you write it down for a reason. I wouldn't say my character is blind if I don't want people to notice, or they're missing an arm if I don't want people to notice. So I kind of give them a little nod saying they have, a jagged scar over their eye that's kind of half open into the socket. And it's ugh. So I'll have my character kind of look at that and kind of give a little bit squick kind of grimace. And it makes the other person feel good because they wrote that little detail down for a reason. I don't have to pay a lot of attention to it. But it is something about their appearance that they did wrote down that they kind of want to bring attention to. So I give a little nod for that.
Okay, so you're listening to this, you're going, okay, that's great. I get the broad strokes. Now I want to make an appearance. And where do we start? Here on the notes, we say we start with race. And so when you two are starting brand new character, not even like a concept really formed in your mind, do you start with race? Do you just go into the character creator, say, or look at a character that maybe not have a role-playing profile yet and say, okay, here's their race. Where do I start from here?
I think race draws me in first over class, because race is ultimately the thing that defines how you behave and act, or what at least your character should behave,
for the majority
of who your character is. So it's not so much I want to play a paladin, it's I want to play a blood knight, I want to play a sunwalker kind of thing, and you can't play a dwarven sunwalker, so you would play a tauren, right? So for me anyway, I choose race first.
And it's a lot of people, that mostly they do choose race first, and then they kind of change their class later. I actually started on random when I first started. I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't really know. I didn't know the lore. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know the classes, what they really were. And so I chose Troll Rogue on a PvP server. And guess what? I don't play that Troll Rogue anymore because you don't have to commit. That's the beauty of it. You can always go back and change it.
You can retcon your character. You can make a new character. You can be
just
like this character. Yeah.
It's like, you know what? If this character's not working for you, you have not invested a lot, or you need to make room in your server because you have too many characters, just delete them.
I am notorious for doing that.
Jack knows all about it. I couldn't find my transmog. Delete, uninstall, destroy computer.
Destroy. Burn the computer.
Move houses, leave the country, etc.
So don't feel bad about practicing. Just go in there, make a thing. If it doesn't work, hey, you can redesign them later.
I'm sure a lot of our first experiences playing WoW in general isn't what it is today than what we started off. No. Like I started off as a dwarf hunter. I don't play dwarf hunter anymore, but it's very rare that you see someone playing the very first character they ever logged into. Still playing that today, and maybe they may play it as an alt or a main, but it's not always the case, and that's the same for roleplay. So you have your add-on, you've picked your race, whatever that may be. Now there's the physical aspects, the beauty, age, goodness, and size, and
we do know that Warcraft, as far as other MMORPGs go, it does have one of the most limited character customizations out there.
So limited.
You don't have height sliders, you don't have waist sliders, you don't have tattoo options, you don't have any scarring, nothing. It is very, very limited. You only have a couple of choices on skin color, facial expressions, and even then they're not that great comparatively to, say, the other MMO I play, which is Final Fantasy XIV. I mean, you can't compare, to be honest.
And that's always been the issue with World of Warcraft. So
don't invest too much if your character doesn't look exactly how you picture them. They're an avatar for a reason. They're just a representation of...
Something to also remember, and this is just a little note for anyone making a new character, is the hairstyles you see on the character selection screen, there are more in the barbershop. There are ones that are not available.
There are more in the beauty shop.
Yes.
So feel free to literally jump in game and run right to Stormwind Orgrimmar and get a haircut, because maybe the hairstyle you want isn't available on the start screen. But with your add-on, you have all these options to create
that's what add-ons are for. That's the beauty
characters. And you decide, as we said earlier, what your character is, whether they're a typical looking orc or a very different looking orc. But the best thing, and you see people get carried away with this, is the realism. The realism of weight and height and age. That's a big factor. Your 8 foot tall human, that's okay. That's not impossible. We know that the mountain from Game of Thrones is huge, but there's not 30 of him walking around in the same area, right? There's not a lot of people who are 8 feet tall on a normal day-to-day basis. So, we're not telling you not to make a character not 8 feet tall, but think about it. Think about your race and think about what the average is. And there is Wowpedia links out there with the average height for certain
Yes.
races and use those as guidelines.
And try not to go more than 1 or 2 feet above or below average, because if you do want to exaggerate beyond that, it does get a little bit into the ridiculousness kind of
Now-
end.
Think about why you feel compelled, or maybe you wouldn't even know like what an appropriate height is. You can input into these add-ons and just say very tall instead of 8 feet tall.
Just say tall.
Just say
You don't
tall.
have to put this. That's what I
Below
do
average height.
with my characters. I don't really put distinct weights. I don't put distinct heights. Even for age, I just put adult. Again,
Yeah,
less
same.
is more. Less is more works for me, and because guess what? It has never, up to date, has come up in roleplay. Nobody has
I know.
cared or asked about my weight.
No one's ever been like, "Are you 6'2" or 6'3"?
Yeah. No, nobody has cared about my character's height. They never asked for it. And the only time age even really comes up, and because I do play elves and I do live a long time, is where so-and-so was at X event in
Now,
history. That's
Speaking
it.
of elves, and speaking of Wowpedia, Wowpedia is a great resource for getting the basics of your racial history. Some
Mhm.
races live a very long time, like elves or Draenei, and some races are very short-lived. And you can
And
get a feel for that.
You don't have to be an expert even in your own race's histories, because who here right now could pass an 8th grade history test? A world history test right now.
Not me.
I mean, I love history, so
Who could do it? A high school AP course history
I'll take that test.
test. Who could do it right now and get it all perfect? Nobody can.
Jack can. Jack's the only one in the world who can.
Probably a few can. A few can. Those history lore and buffs, it probably could. But the majority of us, we really get dates mixed up. We get events mixed up. We have things that we just either don't remember, or we weren't there, so we just didn't experience it, or we just kind of hear it. There's hearsay. There's rumors of it. Like, oh yeah, I heard about it. Your character doesn't have to know where everything happened and what exact time and what they were doing at that time. Because again, from my personal experience, rarely has that ever come up or been relevant in roleplay. And I've been roleplaying since basically vanilla, and rarely has that ever needed to come up. So don't worry, you don't have to pass a quiz to enter a role-playing realm.
And that's the important part is if you don't know your race's history, that's fine. But
It's fine.
also keep in mind your character's age. As Jack said just before, Night Elves and Draenei are very long-lived and have been through a lot. So maybe someone calls you out in game and says, well, how do you not remember this event? Maybe your character has pushed that out of their memory. You don't.
Or maybe they just plain forgotten. It's a lot to remember.
That's a lot to
I don't remember when I was 12 years old. I don't remember like the things I did when I was 12, 10 years old. I remember a few things. Maybe the pony I rode in Little Pony rides.
It's
That was pretty
impossible
awesome.
for us as a...
I don't remember major events when I was 12 years old. I can't imagine having to remember events when I'm 10,000 years old.
Exactly. And it's...
Now-
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say there are certain things that are not that are good to get from Wowpedia. Like, for example, your Night Elf probably wasn't born on Teldrassil.
Yes.
If you were born on Teldrassil, you're probably like 8 years old or something like that.
Mhm.
You're very young. So there are certain things you can glean from dedicated lore wikis like that, and things like the Chronicle, that are going to be important to your character. And those are worth paying attention to and thinking
Yeah.
through.
Here's something I remember this so vividly. What was the content? Oh, I was in Dalaran, and I was on my Draenei, and he had his fabulous Draenei looking transmog. Someone whispers to me, goes, "Wow, you look like an NPC." I was like, "Damn, that means a lot. Thank you." And they said, "I love your RP description." I was like, "Oh, thank you." And they said, "I'm new to Draenei. Can I ask you a few questions?" I said, absolutely.
Yes.
If you're unsure and someone walks by and you mouse over them and they are archdruid, blah, 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 for thousands of years, and they're a night elf, and you're like, damn, I don't know anything about night elves, whisper them and say, sorry to bother you, but can I ask you a few questions? If they're busy, they'll say, not right now, but friend me. They could be an asshole. Chances are not. And
No.
most people
Our peers are nice.
most people
Usually.
we're mostly nice. But you're always going to get that one person who And if they ignore you, don't take it personally. They probably just didn't see the message.
I'm
But
probably busy. Yeah.
we're, at least I know the three of us, busy transmogging.
I know.
At least the three of us here, I love answering people's questions. And if they have any questions.
Oh yeah, I answer people's questions about Draenei all the time. They're mostly the same questions over and over, basic events, physiologies, things like that.
That is Isei's full-time job, is to tell
yeah.
people about Draenei. Like,
Actually,
yeah. This is my
Jesse,
full-time job.
you can put my battle tag in the description. People can ask me about Forsaken. I'm fully open to it.
all right, I'm going to put Jack's battle
Honestly.
tag down below.
Same.
Isei's battle tag is going to be down there. I feel obligated to
And I
put
do have
my
a tag
battle
on my Tumblr called Lorecraft. It has a lot of Draenei stuff in there because that's mostly what I talk about. So if you guys want to browse over to my Tumblr, click on the Lorecraft tag, and you should be able to find a lot of answers about Draenei. Some maybe that questions of you that you have.
Ultimately,
There's been a lot of history.
a long history, and just if you're unsure, ask questions. Join our Discord. Our Discord is constantly talking about
And
lore.
also another good thing about to kind of save face, because I always try to look out for the newbie role players or just people that are still learning. Your character, especially if you have a long-lived race, elves, Draenei, things like that, or even recent characters, less long-lived, even humans, you're gonna get details mixed up. You're gonna
That's
get
natural.
you're gonna get things that you forget. Big events, even big events, people will just, oh my god, it slipped out of my mind, or oh yeah, I didn't mean to say this, I meant this other thing, and it's okay. You don't have to be perfect on the get-go. Your character
Blizzard
can just be
messes it up.
forgetful. They just are not paying attention to it. They can just confuse events, names, dates. That's perfectly fine.
The lore's always in flux. Sometimes Blizzard changes something, or they themselves are like, we're going to do it this way instead. So if you do it, it's going to be forgiven, honestly.
And again, your character can always be lying. They can say they were at a certain event, and it's like, wait a minute, you would have been an infant during that. It's like,
You caught me.
Your character can always be lying.
That's the beauty of it. Is to do what you want. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to do some research. There's many Discords, forums. Hell, message us on Twitter. Isei, myself. Jack doesn't have a Twitter, but Addon on BattleNet. Actually, Jack does have a Twitter, but doesn't use it.
I do have a Twitter.
I've tweeted once.
Not you, Jack. Jack is so against Twitter.
I don't like it.
We're gonna bring him in. we're gonna bring him on. But ask questions. Don't be afraid to do your own research, because ultimately this is your own little project, and no one can tell you. Someone might whisper you and say that's wrong, and everyone has their ways of doing it. You're gonna get some jerk who says, by the way, your entire backstory is wrong.
At least once in your lifetime, you're going to be stopped by the lore police. They're going to pull you over. Beebo.
And they're going to pull out their batons. That's just a giant book, and they're going to beat you with it. And you can choose to say, okay, well, what's wrong with my set? Or if they're a jerk, just ignore them. Take what they say, but people can be jerks sometimes. I'm not saying everyone's going to be nice on a roleplay server, but no one's going to jump at you instantly for having a mistake. People are usually accepting of things like this.
And most of the times, it's not even going to be lore police. It's people that notice a big glaring kind of oh, this is really not correct. And I've done that before, and I feel just as awkward bringing it up to somebody because I want to help them. It's like, hey, this event didn't happen at this time. Your character wouldn't be this age if they went through this. So hey, you need to change that. And I feel bad because I want to help you, but I don't want to make you think that I'm policing you.
Yeah, there is a good way of helping
I just want to make sure that
people.
some details are straightened out so you can have the best role playing experience. So maybe a less nicer person won't be on your butt about it.
So you guys, we've picked a race. We've picked, we know how tall, how much they weigh, how old they are. They're decently cemented in the timeline because we've done a little bit of research and asked some questions. I've picked a Forsaken from the Third War. And
Shocker.
now we go into
Breaking news, Jack picks Forsaken.
Wow. Yeah, it's a cool Forsaken too. So now we go into describing things that are notable. Why is my Forsaken cool? We touched on this earlier. That we actually touched on this pretty in depth now that I think about it, that you want this to be a summary / introduction to your character. You want to entice people to walk up to you. You want to seduce them, not give the whole thing.
Show a little leg. In fact, if you're Forsaken, throw them the whole leg.
Right, throw them the whole leg. We've got Transmog, and now I think we can go in depth on the backstory, because the backstory is where everything comes. The backstory is the root
And
of
I
your
have
character.
a different opinion about backstory. Some people really invest into their character's backstory. I am more of the less is more
Actually go with
category. Because, again, in my experience, it has rarely ever come up in a relevant or significant role-playing changing way.
So, something
What
that
I feel... Oh, go on.
One thing is like your character's past motivation that has brought them to this point, or what they experienced that has brought them to where they are now. Perfectly fine. But if you start from like their childhood onwards and you start writing more than 3 paragraphs worth, you got to trim that fat.
something that stands out
Again,
in my mind.
one, most people won't read that far, and 2, it's not going to be that relevant.
A lot of people love what they write about their characters, and essentially what, as Isei just said, it's not relevant to other players. It's relevant to you and your character and how you behave, but not
Write a doc in
everyone.
private. Write a Google Doc.
that's-
Oh yeah, and that's the
that's
great thing about, Tumblr's, Twitters, things like that. You can expand so much personally on your own characters without really overflowing your add-on.
To kind of bring Issei and Jack's both recent comments together in that you want to entice people, something that I remember I saw, and ever since I saw it, I've done it on all my characters, is in your history, maybe you write a very short description, but again, I'm going to bring up bullet points, and you can write something along the lines of, you may know or have interacted with my character if, and then a bullet point. Participated as a soldier in the First War in the attack on Stormwind. Participated in the fleeing of Stormwind to Lordaeron. Fought with the Paladin, indoctrinated or introduced to the Knights of the Silver Hand in the Second War. Fought in the Second War, different events, just quick bullet points. And so someone walking by as a soldier, I'm strolling through Stormwind and I'm a Second War veteran, and I see someone else, mouse over them. Oh, this guy's a Second War veteran too. What do? They were on the front lines in X battle for Goldshire. That's interesting because so was my character.
Goldshire?
Let
it burn.
I'm just thinking of the piece of artwork from Chronicle with the Death Knights and
I
Paladins.
know, right? I'm thinking about
sure.
we missed a chance.
We missed a chance, but someone might be like, you know what?
Did they regret that? They just at a bar, just Goldshire.
Goldshire still stands because of me.
Should I have just let that?
Thank
let
me
that
for
go?
Goldshire.
And actually,
just comes up and punches you.
I messed that up. It wasn't the Battle of Goldshire. It was the Battle of South Shore. I'm thinking of for the Death Knights. Death Knights.
Maybe there is a Goldshire in South
That's
Shore.
very different.
No, but there's a piece of artwork in Chronicle with First War Death Knights, the human Death Knights made by the Orc Warlocks, fighting some Paladins, and it's a really beautiful piece of artwork. But you could have in your description Second War veteran, specifically X battle. And maybe you read that and you're like, okay, there's my character hook. I'm going to start talking to this guy. Like, hey, don't I recognize you? You look very and there's your hook into the scene with this quick, rather than flood someone's screen with 16 paragraphs, have 16 bullet points instead, which are so much easier to read. And suddenly,
and 9 times out of 10, people will respond to that. They'll roll with the punches. They're like, wait, are you so and so? It's like, oh, wait, yeah.
It's been
They'll start a
years. How are
conversation.
you?
Yeah, and people do change over time, especially humans. They change a lot in a very short amount of time. So maybe they don't recognize them at first. Perfectly normal.
We're 20 years plus from the Second War, so even if you're 5 years away from an event, having those little you may know me, and actually, and it could be recent events too, it doesn't have to be before World of Warcraft. You could say, I participated in the Argus campaign, and you can say, I saw you on Crocoon. Yeah, that was me on Crocoon. Oh, cool. And you could talk about your campaign there.
Now, remember not to list just what you've done as a player, because you've done everything.
Yes.
Right? You've literally gone from the beginning to the end of events.
I've done everything, and my
your
character's done maybe a fifth of what I've actually done.
What would your character as, say, a Night Elf Druid have been interested and involved with? Because they couldn't have been everywhere, and they need downtime, and there may not be why would they go do certain things?
And a lot of events, a lot of things are happening at once, and your character can be in 2 places at once. So it's one of those, okay, if I'm in my character's shoes, where would they lean towards more to go?
Here's something that Blizzard is and it's a problem that I always see it posted as a funny picture on Reddit, is the way the timeline is in game now, especially with new races. So, for example, I saw a picture today, and it was an ogre in Blades Edge Mountains saying, "Rawr, me smash Nightborn," and it was like, why would the ogre know what a Nightborn is? It wouldn't. You're writing your character, you have to remember at which point was your race introduced. Your Tauren, High Mountain Tauren chances are, was not at the Battle for Icecrown Citadel, because the High Mountain Tauren weren't there. Even though you're running around leveling in Northrend on your High Mountain Tauren, and, you know what? I really like Howling Fjord. I'm going to say that I was here. That is all in the past. And that is, as Isei just said, that's a game mechanic.
Not to say you haven't done work recently, because, there's still active fortresses out there.
There are. It's more what you do in-game.
But as far as major events go, nothing so far yet.
Nothing so far yet. And, I remember someone was talking about their Nightborn leveling through Ashenvale, and a lot of the orc comments there are talking about those damn purple elves, and you're as a Nightborn staring at them going, really? And you can't say you were involved in Garrosh's campaign on Ashenvale. However, there is a campaign on Ashenvale coming in a few weeks that Nightborn are more than a part of. And that's where you just got to keep in remember your actual in-game activities, whether they're accomplishments you've made as a player or you're doing right now while leveling, don't always add up because the timeline is a little bit wonky. Don't take all your past accomplishments as current accomplishments, but also as people that are leveling, because a lot of people with a new leveling system are experiencing new storylines that maybe they didn't do on alts back in the day. And you just got to remember, if you're on a roleplay character, just think about what race you are and when they were introduced to the storyline. Quirks. Jack, you want to dive into quirks?
Yes, I actually love quirks. Not everybody does this, I should say, but I typically actually start with a quirk. I look at a race and go, what would be interesting? I like a little bit of a dissonance in the character, because we're not just, in real life, we're not just archetypes. We have our own interests. And one of my Forsaken is very into being put together, very into being clean and pretty and fabulous.
From a Forsaken standpoint, which is, I don't know.
Right? You're literally the grossest race.
I mean, I play a Blood Elf too, so I don't know what your standard of clean is compared to mine.
Oh, my Forsaken probably thinks your Blood Elf is grimy.
He is, actually.
He is a sass.
Touche.
Sass dead.
He's grimy.
But that you could have a Blood Elf who's like, I'm an engineer, and so I'm not super duper prissy. I've actually got oil on my hands, and I'm wearing gears, and what's their perspective like?
This is the start of a romance novel.
Right?
Keep going.
The rough and rugged Blood Elf engineer.
You can have
pulls off his goggles.
Actually,
yes. Oh my god, I've had it up to here with all the things that's happened to them. They kind of want to,
sure.
Kick all that back into the balls again.
The thing is,
they earned it.
When you look at characters like with quirks like these, you can compare them to lore characters. You can compare the character who's not all rotten and grimy and gross to Alonso's Foul. His skin flakes every now and then, but he wears nice robes. He doesn't go out his way to wear gross robes. Or Durotan, as we saw in the movie or in game, Durotan isn't all about the senseless slaughter of innocents, but he's still very much an orc. You've got Draenei like Marad. Marad had it up to here. He said to Varian, "Let me go first."
For that race, and as time goes on, maybe there is an orc who is tired of all the killing. Like, I've killed for honor for so much, and yet I feel nothing. All this honor has made me empty in the end, and they're kind of just done with that.
That's compelling.
Or Draenei, who maybe they were pacifists at first, and they got so tired of the injustices and the terror and the bloodshed done to their people that they started picking up weapons, started killing, and they just got really good at it, and that's what they do.
And you can do this from a class perspective, too. Mm-hmm. Like we have written here, you could be a paladin who enjoys herbalism, so flower picking. Maybe your paladins, like, in their spare time, they really
could also be like their hobby.
Is that a tiger lily?
Oh, it's like, guys, oh my god, don't step.
stops the
just
whole.
like just like in a dungeon when that one guy's like, hey, wait, I have to quickly gather this thing. Yeah. Everyone, hold on. Loot that object.
Maybe they do potions. Maybe you depend on that paladin, for potions or inks, or maybe they're just really into making flower crowns. Don't judge. Maybe they're just an enthusiast. Maybe you have a character that just collects something, because it's just neat.
Or they really double down on some facet of themselves. Like maybe you have a paladin who really is just a light fanatic.
I like collecting, just for myself. Like I remember, I liked collecting rocks, like those little rocks you can pick up from dead mobs and things like that. I don't know why. Because I picked up one rock from a dead mob, and I looted another one that was slightly different. And I was like, oh man, there's different rocks. And I don't know why I got so excited over it. But every time I got a rock, I looted a rock that's a little bit different or had something special from any other rock I had, I put it in my bank. So I had a sizable rock collection. You
could literally make that part of your character, and then when somebody's like, do you seriously have a rock collection?
I just felt kind of embarrassed because who cares for a rock collection? I just liked it. I thought it was neat, and I have my little rock collection stash.
That's interesting.
And there's some you can throw too, but I don't use those because I don't want someone to steal my rock.
I actually collect all the lore books. I think that's a little more typical.
See?
Like
you can just have a little thing that you can just collect. I like rocks, man. Send me your rocks, please. Your unique rocks.
Lord,
these little.
I do nothing with them. They're not even relevant to my character. I don't study them. They're not geologists. I just have my neatly organized little stash of different rocks.
But I guess what we're getting here with quirks and all that is think about something that's kind of a cornerstone to your character. What makes them an interesting character? It could be a serious motivation. It could be something very lighthearted, like I'm a rock collector. That's cute. Or I just really care about how fabulous my transmog is.
There's a note I want to
different angles here.
A note I want to bring up here, whether it's a quirk that's related to your race or a quirk related to your class. There are things, and you don't have to have a quirk. It's interesting. What makes you different from the typical Loktaro Gar orc honor fight me right now? These quirks don't have to be huge. They can be little things or big things. And something I have here in the notes
less is more. Again, we're going to go back to that a lot. Less is more.
But
don't
also,
have 15 quirks.
Make sure your quirk follows the lore. And here's 2 examples. Following the lore is always important, and, especially with your backstory and stuff like that, but same with your quirks here. And an example, before Missa Pandaria, the final patch, there was, the Shaman of the Earthen Ring respected the elements. It is an agreement between you and the elements, and they don't always respond. So having a shaman who disrespects the elements, that's a quirk. That's a little bit different, but that's possible. The Dark Shaman, Garrosh's Dark Shaman, do not respect the elements. And basically they said, why should I have to ask for power if I can just force power, take the power? Elements, if they ever got the upper hand, could respond in kind to that. So, your character's flawed in that they don't respect the elements, but maybe because they are an asshole. That is a quirk that goes against the typical shaman respecting the elements that is possible. Something that isn't possible that stands out in my mind is a pacifist, I do not kill Death Knight. And we know from one of the C-devs with Death Knights that they have to kill. It is not possible for a Death Knight to not be a killer. And here's the quote. If Death Knights do not regularly inflict agony upon another creature, they begin to suffer racking pains that could drive them into a mindless, blood-seeking hysteria, a far worse fate than that of any who suffers from arcane withdrawal. The original question was about...
And that's from the C-dev's mouth. That's just not role players making their own rules there. That's from the developers themselves.
That's from Blizzard's mouth themselves. And Isei, actually, when we were talking in the pre-notes, came up with a great way. I made the joke, what if you play a Death Knight who likes to sell pajamas and doesn't like to kill anyone? Well, he can still sell pajamas, but he has to kill, doesn't kill the old lady buying pajamas, but in some way he has to kill. And Isei came up with a good example of, you want to tell them about the little note that I have here?
Yeah, so if you guys, say you fell in love with your Death Knight as a class. Some people tried it out and they really like it, but maybe you're not so comfortable or you don't like the idea of your character killing for the sake of killing. A good way to kind of work around that is to have your Death Knight work in a prison. Why? Because there's probably going to be many sometimes, inmates on death row, and why waste hangings, getting their head chopped off or things like that? You can have your Death Knight come on over, kill them for you, and it's a win-win. Everyone's happy. Your Death Knight gets their kill, and the prison gets one less murderer.
Except for the person dying, they're not happy. But it's it's not. And that's a perfect example of why employ Joe the Executioner when there's a Death Knight who's like, yo, I want that job, and I benefit from that job.
But then you can also play, say, a human warrior or a human rogue who's pissed off that the DK stole their job. I used to be an executioner.
And a Death Knight came in.
Death Knight came around and took my job.
All because he needs it. What, I can't like killing because I'm alive? Jeez. Killing rights for warriors, bring killing rights for warriors back. But that's something Blizzard said is Death Knights have to.
And then it's also recycling because the Death Knights can just bring back the corpses, and it's like, hey, we need that.
We've gone into.
Don't bury him. What a waste. Those are perfectly good body parts.
Morally gray,
like a Forsaken style judicial system.
Yeah.
This is very. I don't think that would go well in the prison. Like, are we going to use that?
Like in the Horde, you have to sign a waiver whether you like to donate your body to the Forsaken.
The answer is yes or yes.
It's a little check mark, like.
Yes or yes. Under Garrosh and even Thrall's Horde, there was the no option.
Everyone who dies on a battleground has a little dog tag or a little ID that says whether they're a donor or not.
Sylvanas abolishes the no option, just like no, it's
like,
yes.
Oh, he's a donor.
Yes.
Come on, guys.
No, it's like scratched out.
Oh my god, I'm just imagining a Forsaken like, I lost both my arms, can I get a replacement? Good news, we have Tauren arms for you. And he's just like running like a gorilla. He uses his arms to run like on his arms like he's got like tiny little legs. Someone on the battlefield, that wouldn't even be like, that would be terrifying. What is that?
Because you just see the arms, they're just arms like waving around.
And that's a quirk.
And that is a huge quirk.
Yeah.
Oh god. Tauren Arms Joe,
See, this is what's fun about creating different characters. Like, you don't know where your next character is going to hide. We probably gave people a lot of good ideas.
You're welcome.
I hope so.
And we probably put a lot of executioners out of a job too.
But like, you could also be say you're a night elf priest. You don't have to follow a loon. Maybe you're a shadow priest. Maybe you actually whisper or listen to the whispers of the old gods. So now you're like an abyssal priest.
Here's the thing. Especially with Night of Priest, now you mentioned that because I do play a lot of priest. Mm-hmm. You can be a shadow priest still following a loon and the moon because the moon does go through a shadow phase as well.
That's true. Yeah, so there are varying degrees to all of this.
So it does make sense that if you want to play a shadow priest night elf still following a loon and the moon, well, the moon has its cycles. Maybe so do priests.
And so we have written here that like these quirks naturally lead into something that a lot of role players call a hook. And a hook is something, one or two things, maybe three, that are remarkable about your character. Just a simple piece of jewelry, a note in the backstory, and the purpose of these things is to help people initiate roleplay. Either you to initiate roleplay with others, or for them to initiate it with you. They can say, oh, hey, that's a really interesting necklace. What's that all about? Or maybe you've got a pet and emote a lot with. No, this is a hook. This is something that enables interaction between two.
I do say be careful about overdoing it. Whatever you think your character is unique at, most likely it has been done over and over, and a lot of people have seen it. So if you do want to base a little bit of your roleplay around a special piece of jewelry or around a pet or something like that, again, back to the same, less is more. Roleplayers that have been around for a long time have seen it all.
Keep in mind, this is supplemental. This is to supplement a character. This is a tool. This isn't your whole character. No. And just like any tool...
avoid revolving your entire character and their roleplay around a single thing, because it does become a one-trick pony kind of trope really quickly.
Think about, hey, this is just to quickly, get a quick comment and then
not to
roll
say
into
that
my
say
character.
That piece of jewelry is not important to your character. It could be very important to their character. But if your entire roleplay is based around that piece of jewelry, in the end, no one else is as invested as you.
Yeah,
and that can alienate people.
don't walk into a bar and be like, oh man, my cursed necklace is so insane. And people are like, I'm drinking.
Yeah,
Leave me alone. I'm here to not deal with cursed necklaces. Thank you.
Because again, like especially since our characters have been through so much crazy stuff in the past expansion, it's not even going to stand out.
Yeah, but on
You
the
can
other
come
hand,
in with screaming about a cursed necklace, and people will rather just want to be quiet and drink.
Don't shove it in people's faces, but put it in your description, in your bullet points or whatever, and it can come up naturally. Don't force it down someone's like, oh man, I dramatically lift my eye patch so I can scratch my eyeless socket and look at the whole tavern with my one eye. Like, we get it. You have one eye. Don't shove it down our throats. We will see you have one eye in some way.
But you can also use things like that to your advantage as well. Maybe bring attention to your eyeless socket. It's kind of boring because, there's a lot of people who have missing eyes. But say you're the type of dude who kind of keeps their spare chain in their eye socket. And you pay your drink just plucking out coins out of your eyes. That's going to get people's attention. Like, wait a minute, you have coins in your head?
That's something Forsaken would do.
I know. Who's going to rob you in that sense? Like, you can't.
And then maybe one day this is revealed, like, this is the locket that contains pictures of his family who died in Lordaeron. And it's not like overt in his face. He's not like opening it and showing it to you. Like, this is my mom and child and they died.
Don't be like that one dude like at the DMV who like starts like open their wallet and the whole roll of their family photos just come out. Or now with like their phones. I just kind of like go through the entire gallery of their phone content. Like, I don't care. I'm not invested in this lady.
Yeah, exactly.
Just as people.
But you can like have it be a small thing. Like, oh, occasionally he like kind of absently pets this locket, and that's it.
It's like people in real life. We don't care about your kids. Don't show me your kids.
Yeah.
I don't want to see
It's
it.
like if we don't care about your kids in real life, people are not going to care about
I'm not
your
gonna care
kids.
about your kids.
I do kind of care about your dog.
I know.
Show me your
If
dog.
you have a pet, though, if you have a dog, please show me your pictures of your dog.
So with hooks, there's different other parts of your character and your backstory, and one of the things you have to create, just like in D&D, is your character's morality, and it all depends on, there's a certain factor that it depends on, but at the same time it doesn't. I'm gonna go back to my comment earlier on the quirks that fit with your class or your race. Is okay, you're a Draenei, but are you a Velen Draenei? Or are you a Death Knight? As a Death Knight, are you... And I say this because I just did a Death Knight quest for the class hall the other day. Are you like Thessarian, who's very open and all about his fellow brothers and sisters in death? Or are you more like a Baron Silver, who's get the job done and leave anyone behind, and you don't really care about your other Death Knights? Are you an Argent Paladin, or are you a Scarlet Crusade fanatic? It's all up to you.
And again, these are just more like starters, because your characters can and most likely will change over time. I've had characters that start out in a certain morality range, and then as their character develops, as events happen, they've completely changed.
Yeah, totally.
And maybe your character, that's part of the struggle. Maybe they are trying to find, good and justice in the world, but it's just, as time goes on, it's just more and more difficult.
One note we have here is D&D alignments help. You've probably heard of them if you've ever done a tabletop game or any similar sort of thing where you have like lawful good, chaotic evil, true neutral, things like that. If you look up online D&D morality chart, you'll see tons of breakdowns with character examples. These help, but think of them as guidelines, not laws. Don't be. It's not fun to roleplay with somebody who's extremely predictable. Like somebody who's chaotic evil, just doing random stuff all the time. You're like, I get it. You're a warlock, but like, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. Just try and search for the motivation.
Or maybe like they wanted to be a warlock because you know what? I know I don't care about people and I want to be paid while I'm doing it, so I'm going to be a warlock. I mean, you don't have to have a perfect, flawless, foolproof backstory of why your character does it, full of angst and mystery and motivation. It really could be, right now, the state of roleplay that it is, it really could be, I just want to do it. It's like, I read about just being a warlock, and that sounded pretty neat, so I just kind of went with it.
Yeah, and then ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah.
Just go with it. If people don't like it, just
You're
go.
a warlock. You're not even ask for forgiveness.
That's true.
Too bad for them. They didn't get out of the way.
trying to think of like questions for the basic role player that we may not have answered.
Mm-hmm. That's what I think. I'm trying to, especially if they're starter role players, that they don't really need to have everything perfectly thought out, because it's just not really going to come up in roleplay that often. As when I first started, I thought I had to have everything perfect, and in the end, even as a veteran role player, most of the times I just start off role playing without really having anything to start with.
I know we talked a lot about our characters last time, but what were your guys' first successful roleplay characters, and how does that relate to the guide that we've had? What can you think of as like, this is the first time I did it, this is the first time it was successful? What was that like? And if it's cringy, you don't have to go into that, but I'm curious.
I'll start.
Oh, man. Yeah, go ahead.
I did what many people did back in Wrath, and I rolled a Death Knight. And back in Wrath, Death Knight, level 58 Death Knight roleplayers were everywhere, because you wanted to have a high level, but you didn't want to be level 1, and you were too lazy to level. So I decided I was going to roll a Dwarf Death Knight. And I rolled the Dwarf Death Knight, and I remember thinking, I have to come
You must have been like the only Dwarf Death Knight then.
I was one of the only Dwarf Death Knights, and he's still around to this day, he's still in Wyrmrest Accord. I had to think, okay, I have to come up with so dwarves are a little bit longer lived, so I had to come up with an entire backstory. Didn't have to, I wanted to. An entire backstory about what he did in his youth, and what he did when he was older, and family, and all that. And then I got to kill him. I had to say, you know what? He dies. And I kind of got to the point where I went overboard. As a writer, I went overboard writing all... I didn't put this in game, because again, I didn't want people to read all this stuff. Put it in my own docs, and I was like, I like this character. And then I was like, what am I going to do with this old dwarf man? And I was like, oh right, he's a Death Knight, I gotta kill him. Alright, and so I killed him, and I remember walking around, and I, as many people do, I had that stage fright of, I don't want to intrude. And then I thought, well, I'm a dwarf. I'm a dead, angry dwarf. Why do I care if I intrude? So I did the walking through the streets, bar hopping or whatever, my first ever time role-playing, and didn't come in and start punching people, but it was more abrupt and brash. And I there are some friendships that I made back then that I'm still friends with people now because of just how, and this just comes to a dwarven personality of how blunt they can be. Imagine if you're just dead and don't care. And I remember getting...
As a dwarf.
As a dwarf, I remember just thinking, this is kind of fun. And I didn't have a person... I focused so much time on his backstory. I didn't have a personality for him until I just went, he's dead and a dwarf. I'm going to just be an angry, blunt, short guy with a big beard. And I kind of just went with it. And over time, his personality fleshed out through roleplay in that he is a little bit aggressive, but that there are certain moments, certain things that were said that softened him. And then he realized, oh no, I'm being soft, and he tried to be overly aggressive to compensate for his soft point.
Did he ever get sad that because he's dead, his liver doesn't work and he can't get drunk anymore? Was that like a sinking moment?
He was more sad that he couldn't taste the beer, and how he thought if he's ever going to accomplish something as a Death Knight, it would be to create a Death Knight brew. And that came up in conversation with an alchemist. An alchemist looked over and said, that's an interesting, and started talking about alchemy and how I didn't at the time. I don't think we had an answer on how alcohol affects undead, and so there was this little bit of a debate where he was
just keep on chugging until see what happens.
He was more so saying I remember getting angry, not in real life but in character, about this person saying, well, beer doesn't affect undeath, and he was in denial. He was like, no, beer, I can still drink beer. And then he came to this horrifying realization of, oh my god, I can't taste this. And it was just a funny moment where he kind of looked at his mug and was like, and then he looked at the alchemist really angrily, and they turned away and he sulked because he was pissed off that his reality of beer came crashing down around him. And it was I just kind of evolved it on the go. I realized walking into the scene, I had no personality for him, and I just winged it. And it was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something I was searching for when I asked the question to begin with, is we often go in with like just the simplest of concepts, and things will get fleshed out as you interact with other characters. Eventually, your character who's just literally, I'm a blunt, dead dwarf, will over time develop a complex personality. And then you can explain that stuff later.
personally, what I find most fascinating about your undead dwarf concept was the importance, the cultural importance of
Hmm.
beer for your dwarf, which, say, for a human or even a Tauren, might be a minor inconvenience and wouldn't take it as seriously as a dwarf, considering that a lot of their culture revolves the pride of their, their breweries and their beers and their alcohol. That for a dwarf unable to either taste it, there's probably just an entire gallery of different brewing methods and different tastes. And the inability for your dwarf to taste or get drunk on this very culturally significant important detail for dwarves, it probably hits more than any other race.
I remember it was at the end of the scene that this kind of debate came up, and he sulked, and I had to leave because it was really late. So I ended the scene by him storming out of he throws his beer down or whatever, and he just stormed out, and the alchemist was like, but why don't we work together? Like, I'll help you develop a beer. And I remember sulking out, and I decided when I returned to him later on in the week to play him again, I was like, you know what? That's probably stuck with him. Out of all the things they talked about that night, the beer thing stuck with him. And I didn't think about when I made my Dwarf Death Knight, okay, he doesn't taste beer. That's a thing. I didn't have that in my head. And it just came out naturally. And that was fun. That was a concept because I ran into that alchemist again, and my dwarf was angry at him not because he was a dick, it's because he made him realize something. And over time, this alchemist tried to work with my dwarf, and eventually they experimented with different brews, and it became a little bit of a storyline. Every now and then he would pop into a tavern and see my dwarf, and my dwarf would roll his eyes going, oh great, this guy again, here to ruin my night and my whole undead life with no beer. And it became this little bit of a reoccurring sitcom plotline every now and then, like once every couple months, that I enjoyed returning to, that I didn't anticipate planning when I made this character.
Yeah, that's awesome. See, that's kind of emblematic of, I think, what we've been trying to say here is like, go simple, and then roleplay is like improv. You're going to figure a lot of this stuff out as you go. And it can help to have a character who's got, some personality, some confidence, that's why I brought up quirks in a beginning character, is because a quirk can help you engage. Some characters may want to be very serious and not very quirky. You definitely don't want to be too quirky, like we've said multiple times. But
something that's jumping out in my head right now, just with I'm thinking about my first time role playing, our first couple times role playing, and I remember I was so focused on writing his backstory and writing who he was when he was alive that I didn't want him to be fancy. He was, quick summary, he was a dwarven overseer on a trade ship, and he was the one in charge of all the manual labor, barking and yelling and lifting heavy stuff. It wasn't anyone fancy. He worked his whole life on a trade ship, and then their ship got blown off course during the Wrath event and up in Northrend, and he died on the shores of Northrend, and he was resurrected, blah, blah, blah. So I didn't want him to have a fancy thing, and I wrote all this stuff, and in my first couple scenes, his backstory never came up. And I remember thinking, like, why did I focus so much on this? And I realized it doesn't...
all this effort on something that in the end didn't really matter. We've all done that. We all started putting a lot of effort into something that in the end we realized it wasn't important. It's
important to you, but it wasn't important to the scenes. And that's what I realized later. I was kind of frustrated because I was like, it's not coming up. And then I realized, why does it need to come up? It doesn't need to come up. It's there if it does, but it doesn't need to be a dwarf burst into a bar. Oh, I used to be a trader in life. Like, no. First of all, we're more shocked that you're a dead dwarf than who you were in life, kind of thing. And I think that a lot of people who start focus so much on either their appearance or their backstory, one of the two, that it's like, just have your personality, even if it's simple, and go from there. It's very rare that your backstory is going to come up at the drop of a hat. And that's what took me a second.
That's great. I would actually almost retcon some of the damn guide here and say, start with your personality and then fill in the backstory to match. Let's just restart. Okay, so
let's start from the very beginning.
Is how to make a character for RP.
Scrap everything else.
Let's talk.
Start with your personality.
News. And honestly, there's no and as Jack said at the very, 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 very beginning, there's no 100% real way to start with an RP character. It's all up to you, whether it's your personality, your backstory, anything like that. But these things do flesh out naturally, and I think so many people get prepared for the actual creation process, that they're a little bit overwhelmed with all the stuff they've done when they start going. And we're going to cover that, how to start going next week. But this is just things that maybe it shouldn't have been how to create a roleplay character, but these are things that you have in your character, maybe not at first, but over time. You know, as Isei said, her character's morality was one thing, but now it's not. And you don't need to plan, okay, I'm going to start off as this, but I'm going to change to that. No, that doesn't make sense. Unless you're talking about a past character arc that happened off screen or something.
This is why roleplay is amazing, you know, because these things do change, and a lot of it's almost out of your control. It just happens. The character almost feels like their own entity by the time it's been a while that you've been playing them. You'll hear us talk about our characters as different from us, and that's because that's really how we regard them. I don't say like I was walking around all fancy and dropping plague on South Shore, you know.
There's something, as an author, you know, you have full control of your characters and you can decide all this stuff. But something that's really cool on Roleplay Realms is oftentimes your backstory happens because of the actions of other, not just lore events that Blizzard does, but things that other people sitting behind their computers do that impact your character in a small way, in a big way, whatever it may be. It's interactive storytelling. And it's a way that, unlike writing a story, a short story, a fan fiction of your character where it's you, yourself, and you, this is you're on an open field talking with other people, and they're shaping who your character is, or not shaping, because your character might be stubborn, and what they become. And that's one of the best parts, is just start and just go. See what happens, rather than focus so much on the details. Something that's a little bit more specific and a little bit more honed in is a character motivation, and specifically the evolution. And these are just general tips. Keep in mind, you don't need to know this going in. This is just something that I'd call all three of us RP veterans have added here with some lore character examples. I'll let Isei or Jack intervene here specifically.
I guess I'll go. One of the best ways I found out about bringing a little bit more personality / life into your own character is to observe yourself, how you do things and why you do the things you do. Such as, how do you feel when you wake up? Are you a morning person? Do you prefer to sleep in? When you get mad at something, say you stub your toe, how do you react? When you're walking out the door and you're checking for your keys, are you the kind of person that kind of pats themselves down, or do you mentally count in your head, like my keys, my phone, blah, blah, blah? Or do you just just slap all over your body, like, okay, keys here, phone here, da, da, da. Or even how you talk to people. Some people they're very nervous. They kind of repeat things over and over. Others are more straightforward. Some give rambling answers. Others are a little more to the point. And just observe yourself, observe others. And then you're going to start bringing out little personalities. And a good way of also kind of training yourself on how to do this is, if you had to introduce a family member or your best friend to someone who has never met them before, how would you do that? And once you start realizing, oh yeah, they do this, they do this, they do this, and all of it combined makes this person, you can apply that to your own character as well.
I love that. You know, observe yourself, observe others, and bring your character to life.
It's really fun. And this is what I love about talking about lore and stuff like this and a lot of people, when they talk about their favorite faction or races, they look at it from their perspective. When you defend Garrosh or Sylvanas, you defend Sylvanas as a Sylvanas fan, but put on the face of someone else for a second. You know, Garrosh's entire storyline, he was a tyrant, he was a villain. But if you put on that orcish face and you don't think like Garrosh, think like Nazgrim for a second, you can suddenly start seeing things, and something may happen in character, in game, in a scene, that is repulsive, horrifying to you. You're like, oh, you cringe when you read that. But on your Forsaken, if your Forsaken wears body parts and is just a cruel, vicious fighter, are they likely to cringe? Or are they more likely to put 2 rotting thumbs up, or 3 because they've got 3 weird thumbs? Think, how does your character respond depends on their race and their backstory. Don't spend hours thinking about it, but your character as an orc is going to respond differently than how a blood elf might think. So put yourself in that shoes for a second. As you're sitting there typing, think how
It's a
would I
mindset.
that's it. Put yourself in your character. Don't just act as your character, and this comes down to, I'm not an actor. I can't act for crap. I like voice acting, but in terms of like a camera, I have that camera shy, and I keep going back to the camera shy, the stage fright. That's going to be a thing. But the thing is, when you're role playing, the camera's not there. So take a moment, think about it. All right, how would my blood elf veteran of thousands of years respond to this particular moment? Is he okay with it? Is he not okay? What are their thoughts? Are they going to run and scream? Are they going to say something? And maybe your quirk is you don't behave like a typical blood elf will, but that's your character quirk. That's okay. That's what you're known for. So just instantly people, and I see a lot of new role players, and actually one of my friends is guilty of this. When they started, they would respond aggressive to everything in a horrifying, and I said, you're playing a Death Knight, so you're not likely to get offended or repulsed by something like this because you have seen far worse and you've done far worse. And they went, oh right, I didn't even think about all the time my character spent as a Scourge Death Knight. So suddenly they started responding differently in that, okay, you know what, seeing someone hanged in Stormwind, that's not a big deal to a Death Knight who has laid waste to villages, right?
Literal geists for friends who are hanged undead.
Yeah. And
with nooses still on their necks.
Nooses hanging off their necks. He suddenly went, I didn't even think about being a Scourge. And I was just like, I didn't tell him you're doing it wrong. I remember thinking like, man, your character, I said, your character definitely is a little bit weird because they freak out at everything. And they just went, oh, well, I guess how else was I supposed to react to someone being hanged in Stormwind? And I'm just like, I mean, you're a Death Knight. When you first arrived here, people told you to go get hung, right? And he was like, oh, I never thought of that. That's the thing. You put yourself in your character. And that's why I love playing orcs and Draenei, because they have such different non-human mentalities of what is honor and what is a horrible thing. And for Draenei, they've done so much or been through so much. And for orcs, it's a totally different, and Isei and I talked about this many podcasts ago, their world is an eat or be eaten world. It's a kill or be killed world, and it's different than a diplomatic, nice approach the enemy with terms of agreement instead of just, no, crush the enemy before they crush you. There's different mindsets to have based on either your race, your class, or your character quirks.
And like we said, you don't have to have that all fleshed out in advance, but think about it while you're role-playing, and then it will come to you.
The things that work will stick. The things that
Yes.
don't will fade away.
Yeah, totally. That's a great way to think about it, and that's really simple. And
That's actually probably what the title of this podcast should be. Isei just covered this entire podcast like that because
perfect.
What doesn't work,
good?
what doesn't work, you're not going to keep trying because it didn't work in the first place. But there's going to be things that people latch onto. They're attracted to your character. Things that maybe aren't the best thing to be attracted to. I'm going to bring up last week. Birgis, Isei's character Birgis, is an arrogant, cocky son of a bitch. And Isei doesn't like the people like him. But that's what the appeal to his character is.
I'd not to say I don't like people that like him. I adore the people that love him. I just question them.
It's why do you like this?
Because he's not a nice character.
Right.
And Birgis is a very developed character. He is an antagonist / villain, which if you are starting out in roleplay, it's a very, very difficult character type to play, especially in an open role-playing server, because you can say your character is a villain, is the most badass, evil person in the world, but if you don't have other role players to help you back that up, you're just kind of waving your own flag there.
Yeah.
My character, Birgis, is who he is thanks to other role players. Other role players have helped made him who he is. And if other role players didn't react to him like they do, he would just be boasting by himself in the middle of the forest. People are scared of him because other players react that they're scared of him, not because I'm telling them they should be. I mean, I act that they should be. Of course they should be scared of Birgis. But it's because of the other role players' interaction and commitment to the character and my commitment to my character that they can rely that Birgis is who he's going to be, and their reaction brings him more to life than I ever could. And that's what makes a successful or a failed villain or anti-hero archetype character.
This actually, I'm
really
actually drawing.
Depends less on you and more on the other role players.
I'm actually drawing a lot of parallels between Virgus and Jack's character, Forsaken, in that his he mentioned last week that he plays an undead high elf that isn't the typical angry, hateful Forsaken. In fact, I'll let Jack kind of explain his character, but it was reactions from other players. Jack didn't throw it in our faces. It was the guild reacting in a little bit of an eye roll kind of, you stand out as a Forsaken. And, even the guild members used to kind of stare at him like, you are a weird Forsaken. And that was his quirk, is he was, bright purple robes, bright purple turban, but it wasn't a in your face every time. It was more the reactions of other players.
Sure. And I didn't go into this thinking oh, I'm going to be a crazy, quirky Forsaken. I actually, when I first created that character, it was, I think that I was leveling him and I liked the purple robes. And I just started doing it. And, I think, I don't know, I just had this feeling oh, he's wearing pink and mages are fabulous. So he's he'll teleport somewhere and then I'll emote out the glitter. And people would react
to
the
Forsaken. Fortune strikes.
My first scene with Jack, I remember, it was a little one of the scenes was a bunch of Forsaken, and they're all being edgy, talking about dark things, and then Anzorin comes walking up, and the first thing that jumped into my mind was Genie from Aladdin in this sort of funny, and I remember whispering you, and I said, your character reminds me of Genie, and you yelled in caps yes, thank you, that was the goal. And it was a very Robin Williams, boisterous, quirky character that the introduction, all the Forsaken would stare at him because he was that weird as a Forsaken. But it wasn't overdone from Jack's part. It was a proper response from everyone. It was just enough to get the response. I think in the end what we can
narrow it down to is that if you are going to roleplay a character that does have those types of very individual, like I said, quirks, the impulse is to bring it out as often as possible. But that doesn't work because that tires people out very quickly and will actually pull them away from your character. The goal here is commitment. Little by little for a long period of time. And that will stick a lot more solidly than to give it your entire thing in one sitting. And
people have dedicated to Birgis's villain.
Exactly.
People have dedicated to the fabulousness of this undead genie. Not because Jack and Isei threw it in their faces every scene. It was
I didn't walk up there bitch, I'm fabulous. Here's some fucking glitter and confetti.
It was the slow but dedicated commitment over years.
I mean, I might have done that.
That has brought the characters to where they are. Which is not to say you can't go for a character like that, but if you are starting out in role-playing, especially if you've never role-played before, these are more difficult character personality types to get into, and it's something that you can test the water with over time, and who knows, it may work, but most of the times it doesn't, because people just do it too intensely, too fast, and it burns out quickly.
If you want to think of a simple character, my first roleplay character was actually a warlock, an elf warlock, in Burning Crusade, and I just roleplayed him as I didn't know a whole lot about elf lore or warlock lore or mage lore, so I roleplayed him as I was level 20, and okay, so he doesn't know. I embraced that. I was okay, so my character doesn't know a whole lot, and he's very inquisitive about other very high level mages and warlocks and asking them questions oh, what kind of demon can you summon and what's the technique, and I wasn't obnoxious with it. You'd be obnoxious with any character concept, but and I almost used my own naivete to create a character out of that. I was all my whole character concept here is that I'm a low level warlock, but what does that mean? So eventually I acquired a mentor in character. And as I was leveling up, we were even role-playing that out in character of okay, now you're going to summon your first succubus, and went through the preparation. And
always excited,
right?
For warlocks,
Oh man, the succubus is coming.
Oh, a succubus.
That's what everyone goes for. But ultimately,
you could take
that way you became a warlock.
Thing.
That way you signed up to be a succubus. Have your own succubus.
More like the Felguard, but
Hey, I'm not king shaming you, man. I mean,
I mean, yeah, Void.
if you're more the Baron type, I'd go for it.
The Void Lord. Oh my goodness! Or what are they called? The purple ones. The amorphous purple one.
Void Walkers.
Void Walkers. Thank you. I didn't play
Even though
Warlock
they
very
don't
long.
walk, they're more like Void Gliders.
Yeah, Void like bobbers.
Void bobbers. Ooh. Ultimately, your character's going to evolve. Your character's going to change, and that's okay. Don't force it in people's face. Just as this should be the title of the entire episode. Less is more. Go with the flow and see what comes out. Last point I want to bring up before we bring this to a close, and we can all bring it, not just me, everyone can bring this up, is character flaws. And Jack, you wrote some notes here, or you say we can jump in here. Anyone can jump in here with character flaws. But that's the best part of your character, is not what's good about your character, what's bad about your character.
So, I've actually, I've actually had a lot more fun working around my character's flaw than what's perfect about them, because it does give your character a chance to either better themselves or go with it and just see how low they can sink. And sometimes your characters will sink very low, but the challenge of them bringing themselves back up, I always find a little more joy in working around what my character can't do than always exalting what they can do.
And I had written much earlier, many characters have a singular core flaw that is sort of a center point obstacle or opportunity in their lives. And as an example of that, I'd written Sylvanas, naturally. So for Sylvanas, she's afraid to die. Everything she does stems from a fear of the afterlife, which was established in Dave Kozak's Edge of Night short story after Wrath of the Lich King. This replaced her need for vengeance against Arthas. Now she's afraid to die because she knows afterlife's going to be horrifying. Go read that story; it's awesome. It explains
for me, it kind of sounds like a step down.
Yeah, you could argue that. You could argue that that's why she's stepping down as a character. Her needs are even more primal and fearful now, and that's kind
selfish,
selfish, and that's the core there. So a flaw is very simple, very primal. It's not, so Sylvanas' deepest desire isn't to plague the world. She wants to plague the world because of her deepest desire, avoiding death. Plaguing the world allows her to establish dominance and create more undead and potentially get more ways to stay alive in her own way. Can you guys think of any other characters, either in lore or who you've played with, who have a really great, central flaw?
Well, in generalization, especially since we're talking about people who want to kind of step into role play, it doesn't have to be something very great. It could be something small that just kind of get better or worse. You can have a character that just compulsively lies. Maybe they're lying for attention. Maybe they're lying because they're scared of something.
A lot of your characters lie, I'm noticing.
I lie because it's my go-to, because you can change anything. A lie could be truth later on. Yeah. Or a lie could be a lie later on. And nobody knows that but me. And I decide when and if. It gives me a lot more power and control. So that's why I like lies. Yeah.
And then you could ask, why is my character so afraid of the truth? Then you can really get into some damn psychoanalysis on yourself. Mm-hmm. Or you're really tolerant.
Lying. That's the thing, you can control really a lot of people just by lying. Just give them what they want to hear. They'll follow you. I think Bjerg's got so many supporters. By telling the truth?
Definitely not.
Oh, God. Suckers.
And here something that just came to mind, I was thinking as when Jack was talking about Sylvanas' flaws and what other characters is, sometimes you can use these flaws to take a break from your character. And that's the thing is you can put a character on the sideline. Maybe there's a patch or an in-game event, and you actively play by these events, but maybe it doesn't appeal to you, and you want to take a break from your character. Your character's allowed. Their flaws can take them away. Their story can take them away. And the thing that came to mind was my orc post-Garrosh. Garrosh supporter, but not crazy insane. He took a sidestep after in Warlords. Surprisingly, you would think a Garrosh supporter would be hot damn, ready to go for Warlords of Draenor and the Iron Horde. But everything came crashing down and he stepped away. And actually we have here written, your character can change for the best and overcome their flaw and become a good guy. Your character can change for the worst and embrace their flaw and become the bad guy. Or your character can refuse change And we have a note here, depressed, stuck, neutral, unchanging. And my character became depressed. And I actually use it as a break, to take a break from my orc. And it was a lot of my character breaks, there's never I can never find a good reason to take a break from them, and I always want to send them somewhere on a trip. But this was just he was just done, and he kind of just went off on his own. There was no location he went to. It was just this depressed, and I'm not going to get into my character, but it was a flaw that I used as a story hook, as a bookmark to come back to. And that just jumped out of my mind when we were talking about that now.
And again, a flaw can be the best aspect about your character, or the flaw can be the worst aspect about the character. And going back again to my, I guess, repeating trope of lying, it really depends on the character, because I have two characters that lie a lot. My blood elf, Dejanus, my priest, and my night elf, Birgus, my druid. And they both lie a lot. In Dejanus' case, he's a terrible liar, and every time he lies, he gets caught, and there's a big fuss, and he just digs himself deeper and deeper into whatever hole he's lying about. Birgus' case, he's an expert liar. He can manipulate almost everybody by just telling them what they want. They're both liars. They're both flawed in that sense. One is working out perfectly for them. For the other, not so much.
So Björgus embraced the flaw. He became a bad guy, and that became part of him.
Yeah.
Whereas the other guy, I don't know if they've quite come to the crossroads yet. It's just kind of a flaw.
He's just compulsive. He gets scared. He lies, and he can't backtrack.
And at some point,
and he's just digging himself deeper and deeper into social holes because of it. Like, life's not good for him. He's okay, but he lost a lot because of his lies. Whereas Björgus, he was at the top because of his lies.
And as you keep playing that other elf who's not really good at lying, like the more advanced you get, the more you play that out with other people, eventually it may become something that they have to overcome or refuse to overcome.
And in the end, it's going to come to the point whether either he lies himself so much he has to leave, or he kind of buckles up and digs himself out of that hole. And that's going to be, mending a lot of burnt bridges.
Or you could have
be tough.
To shoehorn my Forsaken in here, the very fabulous one. In the eyes of some Forsaken, wanting to be very clean and be a lot like the living is a serious flaw. They say you're not embracing your new life. You're trying to hold on to some shadow of your former life. Other Forsaken are like, wow, that's not a flaw. That's a great characteristic. You're managing to hold on to yourself. That's commitment.
But you're riding away and you're still keeping up your appearance. Good for you.
Right, but it's all based on a simple thing. For you, it's based on, for your characters, it's all just based on a compulsion to lie. For Answerim, it's based on just this desire to continue to be pretty, But a lot of really great stories are stemming from us here, and I think that's a really interesting thing to think about when you start playing a character. Is okay, what kind of behavior are they doing most often, and is this a flaw? And if it is a flaw, how can I make it kind of a cornerstone concept if it's very interesting?
But yeah, things like that.
I'm just imagining a scene where like a couple of orcs and blood elves are talking with a Tauren, and he just like casually leads to the right where there's a pillar and starts rubbing his head, and everyone stops and is like, what are you doing? Don't worry about it.
And don't startle Tauren when you're behind them. They will kick.
Oh my god.
Did it with Dread Knight. Let them know you're there.
Imagine you're
like a horse.
You're a Cataclysm.
You don't want to get kicked by a Tauren. That hurts.
You're a Cataclysm era Forsaken. How'd you die? I snuck up on a Tauren. What? Have you ever been kicked by one of those? Like, he lifts up his shirt and his whole chest just caved in. It's
like a giant hoof cavity in his chest.
That's great.
Turns out I'm best friends with him now because I got raised, but man, did that hurt. But now we're good. We're good now. Okay, man. we got to the point where we're just derailing now. 200 hours. We're gonna bring this to a close, guys. But as we said, this is. We try to give a checklist and different things to have with the character. We decided about halfway through that you don't need all of this to start, but it's things to start thinking about. You don't need to include it in your description, but when you're making your character, when you're walking around and reading conversations and stuff like that, think about all these different things and let it flow naturally. Less is more, but let it flow naturally. Just go along with the flow and see what happens, because Isei's characters... Jack's characters have changed over time. My characters have changed over time in ways that I didn't think were possible, and I'm sure the same for them. So just go with the flow and see what happens. It's interactive storytelling. You're depending on other people to shape who your character becomes. And I think that's one of the coolest parts about roleplay. I think next week I think we're in agreement that we're gonna talk about starting a scene, or maybe not next week in particular, but the next RP episode will be about how to start a scene. Is that a good place to carry on?
Absolutely, it feels like a natural evolution from here. Yeah, because we've been talking about a lot of this development comes from actually role playing. So how do I start doing that?
And so if you're looking for the how-to roleplay, that is coming maybe next week. We haven't decided. We want to break up these series and stuff. Isei and I still have to go back and talk about part 4 of the Draenei. We still have to do a whole episode.
I know we have
Forsaken.
not gone back to Draenei in a long time.
Maybe we'll go back next week.
You.
We'll bring Jack along for next week, and it'll be a whole new ride for him. We'll sing a whole new world about Draenei lore, and then for the Forsaken, we'll come back. I just don't want to pile everything up back to back to back. In case someone's not interested in this topic, that means they have to go 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks without listening. So I want to make sure we break it up, but I do want to come back to it. So next time we come back to this little RP series, it will be about how to RP and how to get started in a scene and the actual process of role-playing itself, not just making the character. We've made your character sheet for D&D. Now let's play the game. Let's actually
roll the dice.
Do the thing. And again,
there's no dice.
There's no dice. Well, yeah, you could have dice, but ultimately
you can have dice, but there's not.
There's not. Ultimately, these are just ideas. This is from what Jack, Isei, and I have done over the years. No one's going to get mad if you do it differently. We're not telling you how to do it. Everything is up to you and how you decide to go along with it, whether it's picking what roleplay realm you want, picking what add-on you want, picking what character you want. It's all up to you and what you do. So do your research, plan, but less is more. And I think so many people, including myself, I started off with this huge backstory that was not relevant on my very first character. And I'm looking back kind of laughing at it going, like, the backstory's there, but it didn't come up for the longest time because that's not natural. That's not organic. So just go with the flow.
And if you do, don't feel bad. We're not telling you you're doing it wrong.
Oh, yeah.
It's just that, you don't have to commit. You can just change it a little bit, kind of, again, trim the fat a little bit, and it'll work perfectly fine. You don't have to erase any aspect of your character's story or their development. It's just that at least you're going to put it on paper, less is more. And it gives you more breathing room as well. You don't have to kind of box yourself in so tightly. You're going to feel more constricted and more frustrated by a character that must be this way, and this way, rather than I have a general idea and I'm just going to flow with it.
And this sounds counterintuitive, but when you don't have everything kind of pre-written, there is more wiggle room for mistakes. As in, like, you're less likely to make a mistake. Because when you don't know the lore super well, or you don't roleplay a lot, and then you pre-write your backstory in depth, there's a chance that you could get something very wrong. Whereas when you have a kind of simple details and you're going with the flow, the flow is not going to be wrong. You're following everyone else and you're part of things, and so there's more wiggle room, there's more freedom to express your character, and less of an opportunity to make a mistake that I know that everyone's very afraid of at first. You don't want to be embarrassed and be like, oh man, I totally wasn't alive for the War of the Ancients. I'm a human.
And we all make mistakes. Everything, there's always that little bit of lore that you're like, oh yeah, I overlooked that. So if someone does call you out on it, unless they're an absolute asshole, don't take it personal. As Isei said earlier, there's that little bit where you want to help someone. Like, oh, by the way, just using Jack's example, your human paladin wasn't around during the War of the Ancients. Well, what do you mean? Well, you're not 10,000 years old. Oh yeah, that makes sense. And you're not a jerk by pointing that out. You're just kind of like, hey, by the way. And someone might say, oh, I thought War of the Ancients was when the orcs first came. No, that's the first war. Oh, I got the name mixed up. Okay, I get it. And you go from there.
Yeah, we all do that.
Yeah.
And, just circling back to mine again, and when we said, like, it's not to put it in your face, doing those little, just subtle emotes is often how you can introduce a quirk. Like, when my character was being fabulous or unusual, it often wasn't like just this show-stopping spotlight thing. It was as I'm maybe bending down to pick something, maybe a bunch of flowers fall out of my character because he stuffed his rope to make him smell better. And that's just a subtle thing.
And also, if you have a friend that does have a character that has a unique quirk or flaw, work with that too.
Acknowledge
I remember with my priest, with a friend of mine, and we both have normal blood elves, green eyes, normal blood elves, blah, blah, blah. And then we had a half-elf friend. And we kind of gave her kind of a little bit of shit in character for it, casting other half-elves, all in good humor. And then my friend and I decided, like, hey, what happens if we give her a fel crystal? Like, we as blood elves can totally siphon that, and we're pretty good. We even get a high out of that. But what happens if we give it to a half-elf? Just as an experiment. It did not end good. We had to take her to it. She kind of like an overdose kind of thing. She's just reacting very negatively to it, and we had to take her to like a medic. We're like, oh shit, and we're like, oh my god, what did we do? We almost killed her.
Don't do fel
We felt
crystal,
so
guys.
bad. Like, dude, we're so sorry. We gave you a fel crystal. We just didn't know.
It's like a,
But it was
it's
us
like
just
a
having
blood elf
fun
frat
with
house.
another character and their quirk. It turned out for something that we just kind of brought it up out of the blue, and we revolved an entire evening for it.
What Isei just said
As-
actually really stuck out as well. If your friend has a flaw, acknowledge it. Work with it.
Yeah, it makes them happy too.
It
Because
does.
they put it there for a reason. It's always a little nod, makes them feel special.
And even though
Yeah,
you're
instead
their
of saying
friend,
no, you say yes and.
yes, exactly, and other
And
people
again,
will be
work
more
with it,
likely
work
to
with it.
respond with flowers falling out of an undead's body.
That was
or
fun. And don't give
half-elves.
half-elves fel crystals. That's what I learned.
That's the
Please
point of this whole
don't.
podcast. Don't give
Oh man,
fel crystals to anyone. That's just a bad.
just don't. Just don't.
Fel presents aren't a good thing, Gul'dan. Okay, there's a reason you've died both times.
You don't.
We are well over 2 hours now, guys. So we're gonna bring
Yeah,
this to
okay.
a close, and we're gonna come back to a how to roleplay a scene or something. Name pending in the future. Not sure about next week, but if you're listening to this in the future from now, and it might be already out, it might not be, who knows. But I want to thank my special guests today, Jack and Isei, for being here to talk about the makings of a roleplay character. Thank you so much, guys, for coming back for part 2.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Always
always fun. Be sure to give us,
Thanks.
share your questions. We can totally roll off of that for the next episode. Let us know what we may have overlooked, what you're interested about, if something intrigued you.
When Isei and I did the Draenei episodes, we started later on, in, I think part 2, we started answering questions from part 1. So since this is its own series, ask us questions. And at the beginning, after the news segment, we can talk about, all right, so-and-so had a question from last week. Let's talk about it. And so-and-so had feedback, comments, stuff like that. So we really want to know, what are your thoughts? Have you gone and made a character since listening to this? How did it turn out? Tell us how it went. Tell us some problems you ran into. Did you give your fel crystals to a half-elf? We told you not to, but did you ignore that and do it anyway?
I mean, we need an outlier, though. I mean, go ahead, experiment.
Don't give fel
Give us
crystals
your
to everyone.
feedback.
Don't give fel crystals to anyone. That's the end rule. All right, guys, this was fun. We're gonna come back to it. I don't know what's happening next week. I'm just gonna improvise it. And to all Canadians listening to this,
Draenei.
maybe not Draenei. It depends on what if any new events go live this week. But yeah, we want to keep with the theme. But that's tomorrow or today. I don't know when this is going live. This is probably going live July 1st. So today's your wedding anniversary in the future on the podcast. So happy anniversary.
Thanks, guys.
We are, in terms of Lost Codex schedule production, we are currently in the making of, and this is a bit of a joke at this point. We ended War of the Ancients Part 3 like last year, and every now and then I get a comment on the video, when's Part 4? We just abandoned it. So War of the Ancients Part 4, The Sundering, is coming to the Lost Codex soon. We decided to, we're going to just finish this. We're going to destroy the world. That is coming. And of course, with another episode is another piece of Isei artwork that is on the horizon, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to, we got a cool little animated sequence with her artwork coming. And so
then it's gonna be fun.
It's not Draenei, not trolls, but night elves. We're gonna break the aesthetic a little bit. And we'll see where we go from there. Battle for Azeroth, Teldrassil, Night Elves, there's a connection. Ajara, there's a connection right there. But if you guys are wondering when the next Lost Codex episode is, I don't know. We are finishing the slides up tomorrow, or today, and animation starts soon. So we are at the halfway point for the next episode. So stay tuned for Lost Codex, War of the Ancients, The Sundering. And I think that's it, guys. We're gonna bring it to a close now. Thank you so much for listening to Decoded, a Lost Codex podcast. I am Jesse.
And I'm Isei.
And I am Jack. Feel free to message me on my BattleNet if you have any questions below, and I will answer any question about Forsaken.
Same thing on my Tumblr. Not my Twitter because I can't really post personal messages that come in. So if you do have questions, just post it on my Tumblr so that I can answer your question and everyone else can see it too.
Links to all those below in the description to Isei's Twitter and Tumblr and Jack's ArtStation and their BattleNet links, and of course my Discord.
Yes.
My Discord. The Lost Codex Discord is a great place just to ask questions and have lore conversations, scream about Anduin's bangs if you want. Everything and anything can be done in the Discord link below. Thank you guys so much for listening to what episode is this? Episode 11, Decoded, the Lost Codex podcast, and we'll see you next week.